President Trump is headed to the West Coast today, where he will meet with supporters over the next 4 days. But that's not the only way the president is drumming up support ahead of November's election. According to Axios, his campaign has invested most of its advertising budget on Facebook and is now testing a new platform to help better reach voters. Axios media reporter Sarah Fisher has more on this from Washington. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
All right, so how's the Trump campaign using these Facebook ads?
So here's the thing. The Trump campaign has relied a lot on Facebook. Almost half of their budget has been towards Facebook ads. But what we wrote about over the weekend was that they don't want to be too reliant on Facebook. To date, they've used Facebook ads to target mostly hyper-Trump fans for donations and to just get better data. But they recognize that any platform, particularly Facebook, could change their policies. They could ban political ads. They could ban micro-targeting any day. And so what they want to do, even though that's unlikely, is diversify the places that they're going to start buying ads so that they don't get caught in a position where they're flat-footed.
So you write that while the Trump campaign is still spending big on Facebook, the percentage of its ad budget spent on the platform has fallen significantly over the past few months. Explain.
Exactly. It goes to that point that I was just saying, that they really don't want to be too dependent on Facebook, because if they are, they run the risk of Facebook changing their policies and they don't have a plan B. So here's where the rest of their ads are going. They're expensing more on Google and Google-owned YouTube. They're experimenting even with podcasts. They've bought in some ads on conservative podcasts like The Charlie Kirk Show and Laura Ingraham from Fox's podcast. They're even trying to look at different news publishers that they could run ads on, and maybe that'll bait some more engagement. But at the end of the day, Vlad, they're not going to give up Facebook entirely. Facebook is still one of the best places where they can target their demographics, where they can get a lot of data. And so even though the percentage of ad spend is declining on Facebook, don't expect them to leave Facebook anytime soon.
So you point out that it's the best way for them to get to their demo, but it does sound like they're sort of preaching to the choir. And at this point, almost 4 years in, the president has not tried to expand beyond his base. But I wonder if they're also using Facebook ads to target people like, for example, minority voters by using some of that. It's easy to use statistics in a way that you want to tell a story, and that can sometimes be misleading. I wonder if that's an approach that they're sort of considering.
Well, they are targeting different demographics, to your point, with different messaging. For example, they were running ads in Spanish that were talking to Hispanics in the United States. And while you're right, they do target their core base a lot on Facebook. One thing that they do is they use something called lookalike audiences. This is something that most campaigns and even regular everyday brands do, which is you take a list of people that you know are supporters, people who have voted before or have donated before. You input that into Facebook's system, and they're going to pop out an even broader list of people who might not have been on your list, but look like the people that are on your list. And those are the types of people that are just on the periphery, outside of the people that the Trump campaign would normally target, that they're able to target better on Facebook. It helps them expand their audience and their reach just a little bit more.
All right. At this point, Sarah, what sense are you getting about how the campaign's social media strategy this time around compares to its strategy back in 2015, 2016?
Oh, great question. I mean, the biggest is that they're more diversified. So they've recognized that they can't be too Facebook dependent like they were in 2016. The other thing I've noticed is that they have gotten so good at understanding what types of messages work that they don't have to run as many iterations of creative this time around that they did in 2016. So what do I mean by that? In 2016, they were running like 40 to 50,000 different ads, experimenting with them every day. And then they would double down throughout the day on the ones that worked. Sources tell us that they're kind of going at half that speed. They're not putting up as many iterations of ads, although they're likely to increase the amount of ads that they experiment with over the summer and as the campaign ramps up. But part of that is just because they know what works. I mean, they've gotten really good at this. So that's another key difference. And I'd say the last key difference of what they're doing differently is that they've noticed that when you try to put down an opponent, that doesn't rally Trump's base a lot. What rallies Trump's base is fandom. And so they're actually putting out a lot of really positive ads about the president. And that's what they find resonates really well, as opposed to ads that might say, bash another opponent of the president's.
And before I let you go, Sarah, let me ask you to weigh in on another one of your articles. You say that while big national newspapers grow stronger, local newspaper chains are combusting. Why is that, and what does it mean, more importantly, for local papers going forward?
Yeah, Vlad, it's a super upsetting phenomenon. You have these big national newspapers like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post that are accruing so many subscribers, making tons of digital cash. And then you have local newspaper giants like McClatchy, which filed for bankruptcy last Thursday, that really are struggling financially. Here's why I think it's happening. For a long time, local newspapers were the only game in town. You know, you only really have one major paper for each small town or even small city. And so when it came to marketing, they didn't really have to distinguish themselves. Their distinguishing factor was, hey, we're the only people that are covering your school board election or covering what's happening in your municipal court. But what happened was that as the internet came along, people could find that information elsewhere. And I think local papers weren't great about marketing their value add to people to convince them to subscribe. The national outlets, on the other hand, were facing so much competition from companies like BuzzFeed or Vox or Vice in the digital era that they invested heavily in marketing themselves as being a distinguished thing that people have to pay for. And the best example I'll give that to you is look at the New York Times. I mean, people love the New York Times because they get a cooking app, because they can do crosswords, because they can read about a parenting or a modern love column. The Times has distinguished itself as a lifestyle services company. It's invested in Oscars ads in order to get that message across. The local companies just haven't been doing that kind of marketing, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of them, quite frankly, go bankrupt or sell.
Yeah, and to add to the point that you make, Sarah, it's also important, I think, for our viewers to understand that some of these, what are called local newspapers, break a lot of big stories that become national stories. For example, the Miami Herald, which is published by McClatchy. Julie Brown, the reporter who essentially brought the Jeffrey Epstein allegations to light, at least on a national level, is one of the reporters there. I noted that she tweeted this past week that people should subscribe to the Miami Herald because some of the stories that they do, while perhaps is local at some level, do have national implications, and so I've long subscribed to the Miami Herald, not only because I spent some time in my childhood there, but because they do break stories that have a lot to do, for example, with what's happening in the Caribbean. The Kansas City Star is another one of those great newspapers. The Charlotte Observer, the News and Observer, the Star Telegram in Fort Worth, Texas. These newspapers are vital to our democracy and to the communities that they serve, and it's really sad to know that they're being sort of squeezed, although these other outlets that you're talking about, like BuzzFeed, serve a purpose and are wonderful outlets on their own. It's difficult, the environment that some of these newspapers are operating in.
It's so difficult, Vlad. I'm glad that you made that point, and I'm also happy that you listed some of the great papers that are doing this good work. You know why it really matters at the end of the day? Local government studies have shown are more productive. They save more money. They spend their money better when there's accountability from the fourth estate. When the press is scrutinizing local governments, local school boards, local officials, they tend to make better decisions. And so that's why it's vital to our democracy that local news survives. And the last point I'll make here is that this is a societal problem, and it's going to require a societal solution. We can't just have billionaires come in and buy up papers. That's not a long-term solution. We're going to have to address this more holistically. I don't know what it's going to be, if it's going to be regulation or business leaders stepping in. It could be a combination of both, but something's going to have to get done, Vlad.
Yeah, I hope something does get done indeed. Sarah Fisher, always great to have you as always. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.